Welcome to the Money Made Human podcast. It celebrates at its heart the work of credit unions and their vital role in enriching our lives and communities. Brought to you by First Class Credit Union, each episode features insightful discussions revealing the meaningful impact that can be made through economic collaboration. Mostly, it's a collection of compassionate conversations about navigating life and the individual journeys we take. This episode features sensitive themes and topics. If you're affected by any of the conversation, links to available support will be included in the episode description. We're trying to make money more human, so be kind to yourself as you go forward. Thanks for listening. Good morning and welcome to Money Made Human, a podcast by First Class Credit Union. We're delighted today to be joined by two amazing women from Scottish Women's Aid, Jenn Glinski and Judy Ferguson. Welcome, guys.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Thank you so much for being with us. And, I can't believe we're on the 1st of December already. So we have so much to talk to you about, if that's okay. I suppose I wanted to start by asking, what does Scottish Women's Aid do and why is it important?
Okay, well, I'll take that one. Thanks, Gayle. Yeah, and thank you so much for inviting us to come and talk to you today. We're really looking forward to this. It's a great opportunity to highlight what we do and talk about some of the issues that are really relevant in Scotland today. So Scottish Women's Aid, we are a membership body that covers the whole of Scotland. We are the lead organisation in Scotland working to prevent domestic abuse and improve responses and support to survivors. We were actually established in 1976, so next year is our 50th anniversary, and we were established as a result really of, I think it was about 7 different groups kind of separately but kind of jointly coming together and recognising that domestic abuse was something that was really relevant in women's lives and that they needed to think about safe spaces for women to go to. So it was initially about providing support and providing refuge. And as I say, now we are the membership body for a network of about 31 women's aid groups across Scotland who are specialist domestic abuse services from Shetland right down to the borders. And they provide a whole range of support around things like crisis intervention, advocacy, counselling, outreach, refuge, of course, which I think is what probably most people think of when they think of women's aid, but also follow-on support, because sometimes people need support long after they've moved on from the relationship and managed to get away from the person who's been causing them harm. So not only do we do that, we also really importantly campaign for change. We are trying to improve the recognition and response to domestic abuse in Scotland. And over the last kind of 40 years, it has greatly improved. There's a much better understanding that it's more than just physical. And obviously, Jen's going to be talking about some of those behaviours shortly. But yeah, we try and provide opportunities for the survivors in our network to influence and shape policy and practice. So we have a survivor reference group who input to committees, speak to Scottish Government, and really try and use their lived experience to say, this is what works, this is what helps, and this wasn't actually particularly helpful at all. And really try and, as I say, make sure that the kind of systems in Scotland are better set up to support survivors. The other thing that we do, and probably this is something that not a lot of people know, we actually also manage and deliver the Scottish Domestic Abuse and Forced Marriage Helpline, which is 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, via a variety of platforms, so website, text messages, WhatsApp calls, etc. And that is a service for anyone in Scotland who's experiencing domestic abuse, so men, women, LGBT people, but also it's a really good resource for practitioners. We get about 14,000 calls a year on that helpline, and about 2,000 of them are actually from practitioners, people saying, I'm working with somebody, I'm not quite sure what to offer them, I don't really know what. So it's a great resource for people to use professionally, but it's also a really good resource if you're sitting with somebody on a Friday afternoon at 4:45 thinking, I'm finishing my work for the day, but what have they got to access over the weekend? So it's a really good support opportunity. And then the last thing that I suppose we'll do that I'll highlight just now is we provide a whole range of training and workforce development for public bodies, private bodies, organisations and individuals to really try and enhance their understanding of domestic abuse, because so many people still do think of it in that kind of narrow lens of physical abuse. And while that is very often the thing that brings it to light, what you'll usually find out is there's a whole range of other behaviours that people are experiencing. So that's everything that we do, kind of in a wee nutshell. Hope that's been useful.
Judy, it's so useful to hear all of that. And I'm really looking forward to talking to you in a bit more detail about some of it. I think we should also say that for anyone listening to this, they might find some of the information, they might find it helpful, but also they might find it potentially to be triggering, and they might need help on the back of it. So we will certainly post lots of pathways and helplines as we issue this podcast.
That's great, thank you.
I wanted to ask both of you. Judy talked there about advocacy and trying to change opinions, and you guys are part of the current United Nations campaign around 16 Days of Activism, and this year it's targeted at ending digital violence against women and girls. And I just wondered if we could touch on that before we move forward and look at the detail of what Scottish Women's Aid do.
I suppose there's kind of two elements to that, because a lot of Jenn's work is probably, there's a lot of abuse that will take place via digital means that will include economic abuse. But one of the things that we hear a lot from survivors and victims is that, you can't escape abuse because of the digital access, because of the digital world now. Whereas before, you could, come in, close the door, and hopefully not continue to be exposed to abuse. We are hearing that people are, still getting WhatsApp messages, constant calls, phone calls, their accounts hacked, maybe malicious lies spread about them on social media platforms, etc., as well as maybe some of the digital means that maybe, Jenn might want to talk about when we talk about banking apps and things like that being used. I'll kind of hand over to Jenn.
Yeah, I mean, the digital abuse is obviously the new frontier now, what we're seeing in terms of domestic abuse. So, and you hear it with all sorts of things as well with young people in terms of bullying and stalking. We all probably have grown up with bullying and know what it is, but it was, as Judy said, you could come home and close the door and it would stop until, you were then confronted the next day with that person again. But now with digital abuse, it is nonstop. It is 24/7. It does dictate your life. And Judy already gave some really good examples. So I work specifically on economic abuse for Scottish Women's Aid, and I do see quite a bit of digital abuse directly connected to economic and financial abuse. So this would be using your digital banking platforms and your digital banking apps to commit economic abuse. So gaining access to, for example, the joint account through your banking app, using the fingerprint to log into your account to transfer money. We have unfortunately heard from women who, have experienced this even while they were asleep, for example, where the abusive partner would use their thumbprint to log them into their digital accounts and then remove benefits, remove income, whatever it might be, take out loans in the woman's name without their permission and without their knowledge. And I think as much as, financial institutions and probably credit unions as well have tried to make the customer and the user experience very easy to facilitate. And, this is great. I don't have to remember my password. Who remembers their password? I'll just use my thumbprint. One of the things I always say is that if it's easy to use, it's also easy to abuse. And that's something that, we try to, through training and campaigns, make people aware of and institutions aware of as well, that it's not just in your home. It's everywhere. It's on your phone. And especially if you can take over someone's mobile phone through force or coercion or threat, it's a really powerful tool. I mean, if we even think about just the three of us on the podcast today, if you were to remove my mobile phone, I wouldn't be able to do much of anything. I can't remember anyone's phone number for a start other than the police and the fire service. So those are the only numbers I've got. But in order of calling help, accessing my bank accounts, even some of my digital documents, you can hear from my accent, I'm not Scottish. I am a migrant to this country, so that comes with different visas and different paperwork, which is now actually all held through on a phone. We don't have paper IDs anymore that we can have access to. So controlling someone's mobile device is actually a really, really powerful form, of course, of control. And unfortunately, we're seeing more of it. So we're very, very happy that this year, for the 16 days of action against violence against women and girls, that focus is on digital abuse, because it's escalating so rapidly, and we don't seem to be able to put checks and balances in place for it. And it can be anything, like I said, from accessing your bank accounts, your mobile device, taking that over, even the use of AI to generate images that are then circulating. And once it's out there, it's out there. There's really no clawing it back. So it's something, like I said, that's rapidly developing, and we're trying to keep up to speed with, but it almost seems impossible. And I know the theme for this year's 16 days is all together. And I think that's a really, really important message. And that's something, as Judy's already highlighted, we advocate for very, very heavily at Scottish Women's Aid, because we cannot do this alone. And in terms of ending domestic abuse and violence against women, it does require all of us. And I think that's a big part of our job, I would say, Judy, to make people aware of the role that they have to play in identifying domestic abuse in all of its forms and responding to it. Because I think a lot of people are still, that's nothing to do with us, and we don't have a role here. So it's good to hear that that's the theme, and the more specific focus is on digital abuse.
I noticed as part of the campaign that that's one of the things they are calling for, that us as individuals stand up to this. And of course, credit unions have a role to play. We're a financial institution, we can help with it. But I thought the interesting words of individuals can stand up to it too was really important. And perhaps that's something I don't know if you guys can share in terms of what might an individual do to stand up to that? Is there an example of something we could all do tangibly?
I think it's about just being mindful of some of the messaging and the responses that are out there around domestic abuse. Unfortunately, there's still a lot of victim blaming. There's still a lot of why doesn't she just leave? And a real lack of understanding to some of those financial, structural, attitudinal barriers. So I think it's about individually, just what Jen was saying there about make yourself aware, they're become more knowledgeable about it. There's lots of information on our website that talks about what is domestic abuse, how does it affect people, what would be a supportive response to somebody who's experiencing domestic abuse, because I know certainly before I joined the sector, I thought it would have been, well, you would say to somebody, oh, you must leave, come with me, I'll take you to the police, I'll take you to Women's Aid, I'll take you here. And actually what you want to do is listen. Listen to somebody and say, that sounds really difficult. Would you like to speak to someone about it? So it's, there's kind of multiple prongs to it, understanding that there's a whole range of barriers. It's not just as simple as getting up and leaving. People don't stay because they're weak or they're stupid or they don't get it. Living with domestic abuse takes incredible strength, and survivors are exercising that every day. Usually they're getting up, they're going to work, they're maintaining networks for their children. Very often they're the ones spinning all the plates to keep that household on the go. So I think it's about trying to challenge some of those attitudes, first of all, so that people feel able to speak out and say, this is something that's happening to me, without fear of being judged or losing status. It happens to people in all walks of life, all different backgrounds, and things like maybe if you are maybe if you're a police officer, maybe if you're, those things are weaponized by perpetrators to make you think, well, nobody will believe you because of the job you've got. Nobody will believe you because you're educated. Nobody will believe you because, you've got mental health needs, usually as a direct result of experiencing abuse. So it's a little bit about trying to increase your knowledge and understanding, challenge any attitudes that you do hear, be validating not think that you're there to rescue somebody as well, because we're not, we're there to say that sounds really difficult. I saw an advert for a helpline that I think might be useful for you to speak to, and providing that kind of validation, direction, pathway to support, because there are experts out there, that are specialist services. You're not alone. You will be believed. So as individuals, I think as much as we can normalize talking about domestic abuse, we don't want to normalize the prevalence of it, but we want to normalize actually this affects, there's 60,000, over 60,000 incidents of domestic abuse recorded by the police in Scotland each year. 4 out of those 5 victims will be women. 1 out of 5 will be either men or people in LGBT relationships. So it does happen to everyone. You're not alone. It's not your shame. It's the shame of the person doing that to you. And yeah, there is support out there, and there's options and choices. So that's kind of the key messages that we would really like people to take away.
What does it look like? What might domestic abuse look like? And I guess adding on to that, what would financial abuse look like as well?
Jen, I think you could probably cover all of those if that's okay.
So in Scotland, we talk about coercive control, and our legislation, the Domestic Abuse Scotland Act, covers all forms of coercive control. So we think of domestic abuse and coercive control as a pattern of coercive and controlling behavior that really suppresses someone's space for action. Again, it's a pattern. It's not necessarily always a one-off incident, but it's belittling, humiliating. It can have physical aspects as well. It can have sexual aspects as well, where there's sexual abuse, financial abuse, as well as psychological and emotional abuse as well. So we can see this, and it can take, unfortunately, a variety of different forms. And one thing that I'd always like to point out to people is they rarely operate in isolation. So it's very, very rare that someone is just experiencing emotional abuse. So let's break some of these down, right? Let's think about emotional abuse and psychological abuse. That can be belittling or humiliating someone, constantly telling them that they're not good enough, or doing it in very, almost covert ways of just like, well, you're not very good at your job, and I don't see how you're going to amount to anything. Putting demands on someone is like, if you don't do X, Y, and Z, it shows that you don't love me. And that's something that's really important. We need to understand how it all operates within a romantic relationship. So you will want to do things to, have a good relationship, to be there, to be supportive of your partner. I see this a lot with financial abuse, where, for example, the abusive partner says, well, I have a really bad credit rating. That may or may not be true. I can't get a loan. I want to start this business, but I can't get a loan. You have to take this out for me. You need to take this loan out for me. And if there's even, any resistance or reluctance and go, well, I'm not so sure, we've only been dating 6 months, whatever it might be, the emotional aspect is then, well, you must not love me. You must not want me to succeed. You must not, take our relationship seriously. If you really did care for me, you would do this. So you can see how all of those little bits get interwoven. And what it basically creates is this complete control over the other person. And it's usually very subtle. It usually starts very small. We talk about things like love bombing, where you're overwhelmed by, the amount of gifts or presents, or the lavish, the compliments, and then it's slowly introduced. And what it's meant to do is just chip away at who you are and what you need to survive and thrive. And this can be introduced in whatever way. As Judy said, this can and does happen to absolutely everyone. It doesn't matter socioeconomic background, ethnicity, religious background. None of it matters. It will be tailored to who you are and different aspects of you. If you, happen to have a very, very good income, let's say you're on £65,000 a year, that is something that can be chipped away at. Again, you can be prevented from working. You can be prevented from seeking out education. All of these ways to just really chip away at yourself, your self-esteem, and your belief in yourself. And that's also what makes it so hard to recognize, because it is introduced like a little drip feeder, very, very slowly. And you just think, oh, this person is doing this because they love me, or this person is looking after me. And, they're right. I'm not very good with money. So it makes sense that they've taken over the joint account, because I really don't know what I'm doing, even though there's no evidence of that whatsoever. So The person will usually isolate you from family and friends, which makes it even harder to get good advice or to even access advice, never mind good advice, and to reach out to people, because that person becomes your whole world. So I don't know if that helps paint a little bit of a picture, or Judy, if there's anything you'd want to add to that.
Jenn, I just wanted to ask on the back of what you were saying there, in terms of coercive control, would that mean, or could that mean, that the victim has to change their behaviours almost to survive that, or to adapt to that? I'm not sure if I'm making sense, but
No, you are.
it,
Yeah,
it,
no.
it, it would seem under coercive control that they might themselves change the way they behave to prevent a triggering event or an escalation. Is that what it looks like, or is that what could happen?
Yeah, it can absolutely. I mean, absolutely, that is part of it. You are basically making yourself smaller to fit that version that the perpetrator wants. So that could be, like I said, isolation and intimidation are huge aspects of coercive control. So let's say you were a very outgoing person, you're the life of the party, you were out 3, 4 nights a week. Now you have this person who is limiting and restricting that, who doesn't want you to be life of the party, who doesn't want you going out, who says, some pretty horrible things. I probably don't want to say it out loud, but just as an example, well, when you're out there, all you're doing is flirting with other men. You shouldn't go out. You shouldn't wear that. You should wear this. So literally every aspect of your life can be controlled in that way. And you start to think, oh, was I being too flirty? Did I wear the wrong thing? What happened? So you want to make the relationship work. You love this person that you're in the relationship with. So it becomes an important aspect of that. Well, now it's time to slow down, isn't it? You can't be out on the trot 4 nights in a row. That's not the way this works. And, it's making me feel bad about myself that you're always out. It sounds like you don't want to spend time with me. So you do, like, that's just one very big example of how that can be limited. You need to come home straight after work. You can't go into work anymore. I don't want you to go into college to that class. I don't like when you do the extracurricular activities. I think John, fancies you, and that makes me feel uncomfortable. So you start to limit who you are and what you're capable of, because that is what the other person's demanding. And you're absolutely right. It usually is also tied to safety and making sure that, okay, I have done this. I did go out 3 nights in a row, for example, and there were consequences for that. And I don't want to disappoint the other person. They did say I shouldn't be doing this as much anymore. And you go, maybe they're right. Maybe this is the better option. And as I said, it's a drip feed when that happens. And as things, that becomes deeply ingrained and part of the relationship, that when there are demands placed, that you have to adhere to them, because otherwise there'll be consequences either for yourself or for the children, and sometimes pets involved in the house as well.
And you talked about financial abuse. We're extremely interested in this as a financial institution, and the sign behind me is something that we believe in terms of money made human. What you mentioned, that the examples of financial abuse, someone could apply for a loan in your name, someone could change your password or access your online banking. What might credit unions or financial institutions do more of to help victims experiencing financial abuse?
Absolutely. So that's a really, really big question. So I'll try to
Of course.
break it down. Just to say one of the big things. So we talk about economic abuse and financial abuse, and we want people to understand that economic abuse is this bigger umbrella term, and it can include any and all of the resources that you need to survive and thrive. So I gave, for example, my documents, my passport, my birth certificate, my laptop, my car. All of these things are resources, and housing is a particularly big resource. If someone has power and control over that, which that is the ultimate goal of coercive control, the way that then affects your life and the things you're able to do, it becomes very, very limiting. So we always encourage people to think about economic abuse more widely. Financial abuse is a form of economic abuse. And as you said, it specifically relates to money. So what we see oftentimes is the complete takeover of someone's account. Equally, they could place everything in the other person's name. So the perpetrator is not responsible for anything. Everything's placed in the survivor's name. Every bill, the survivor is responsible for. Every payment, every cost of living, absolutely everything. And that also depletes your financial resources, right? So we always invite people, especially financial institutions, to not just think of financial abuse as completely no access to finances whatsoever, but that person could also be the sole person in charge of everything because the abusive partner is refusing to contribute. And this isn't a refusal to contribute because there's no money. It's because of that power and control. I have an income. I'm keeping this to myself. I'm making you responsible for absolutely everything. So really what we're looking for from financial institutions such as yourself, and it's very similar to what Judy already outlined, what we're looking for from individuals. The education piece around what this is so important. So we'd always ask, take specialist training, give it to your staff, adjust and have a look at your policies and procedures as well, because it's not just your customers who are experiencing this. We are 3 women on this call. 1 in 3 women will experience a form of violence against them. So if you think about your customer base as well, how many customers do you have? How many of them are women? It can also happen to men, but as Judy said, the number is disproportionately women who experience domestic abuse. Are your policies and procedures, do they recognize it? What do you offer your own employees as well? But the most important thing to start with is that training and that awareness around what economic abuse is, what financial abuse is, what are some of the signs? What are the red flags when you're working with a customer, or if you're even just sitting next to your colleague and you're hearing them talk about things that are going on in their relationship? So are they fearful of their partner? Are they worried about accessing their money? Do they maybe not have knowledge about passwords, security codes, or how money's been moving? Has there been a recent transaction or a loan that's been taken out that they have no knowledge of? Or when they speak to you, maybe, you start to hear a little bit of reluctance of, this really wasn't my choice. I'm doing this because I have to. I'm being threatened and coerced into that. So the first step is definitely education, awareness raising, taking that training, understanding what it looks like for customers, understanding what it might look like for your staff as well. I think then being very clear on what the spectrum of economic abuse is. So is it coerced debt? Has debt been taken out in this person's name fraudulently, so without their knowledge or consent? Or were they forced or coerced into taking it out or threatened into taking it out? Equally, what we see a lot when all of your resources are being controlled, we hear from a lot of survivors that they then have to take out additional credit in order to survive. So we hear a lot about perpetrators not giving money for essentials, removing, the survivor's income or their benefits from them, and then withholding that money for essentials. So we hear, unfortunately, a lot of moms taking out credit cards to buy nappies, to buy formula. So that's now debt, which obviously you can see what it's being used for, or where it's being used. That asking those very difficult questions around, are you freely doing this? Is this, I've noticed some spending habits that have changed recently. Have you entered a new relationship? These really, really difficult questions about how money is moving. And that's, as Judy said, it's so important to not victim blame within that, with any form of domestic abuse, and asking difficult questions to get to the heart of what's happening with the money. In addition to those difficult questions, I think it's very, very important credit unions and any financial institution offers confidential and practical support. And this goes back to, Judy broke it down beautifully. I can't really add anything, asking the questions, but also listening. What has the experience been for this customer? What are they saying to me about this debt? What are they saying about the loan? What are they needing from me with this joint account? Judy was absolutely right in pointing out this isn't just something that happens in a relationship, it's perpetrated post-separation as well. So if 2 people still have access to that joint account, and your policies and procedures, for example, don't allow them to come off of that joint account without 2 signatures, which is very, very common, but that person's telling you, I cannot be in the same room as this person. I can't get you that second signature. They have agreed to it in practice, but they're never going to sign off on it. Then you have overdrafts, then you have debt, then you have someone who's being chased for it and the other person isn't. So again, looking into listening and asking what that person needs from you. I think what people are most surprised by when it comes to financial institutions and debt and financial abuse is that survivors are not asking for big write-offs. They're asking for really, really practical support. and they're telling you, like, this is not mine. I did not know about this. Or maybe I did know about this, but I was forced into it. I now can't separate because I don't have the money to do it. I'm worried about debt when I leave. And that's something that we really need people to understand, is that economic safety is directly related to physical safety.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where you guys come in. This is where you have a huge role to play. Providing confidential advice once you've done that listening piece, doing more practical things like removing someone from a joint account, be that the person who's come to you as a survivor or even perhaps the person who is the perpetrator, because they're not going to come to the table and play ball. They're going to make life as difficult as they possibly can. It's in their interest to keep that joint account open. You'll see abusive messages being sent back and forth. You'll see interference with child maintenance, maybe not getting paid, maybe getting paid 1p at a time with an abusive message attached to it. So again, that listening, what do you need from us in relation to what's happening to your accounts? And something big, Gayle, that's really, really important is that a lot of the time, survivors will not recognize financial abuse for what it is. They'll just genuinely think they've mismanaged their money, they've done something wrong, or, you know what, I am responsible for this because I haven't seen a piece of post in 3 years. What am I going to do about that?
And might they be blamed by the perpetrator in terms of gaslighting or, you know, making that survivor feel as though they've done something wrong?
Absolutely. Yeah. Gaslighting plays a huge part in this. Again, that's that part of the emotional and psychological abuse. I'm going to manage all the money because you clearly have no idea what you're doing. Let's say, for example, an abusive partner has been withholding your post. Let's go with a very common one, council tax, right? Council tax is very scary for everybody, but you've gotten a letter from the council tax, from the council. You've been giving your partner money to pay the council tax bill. He's deliberately not paid it, right? This gets you into debt. This gets you into trouble. It's something that he can then really hang on to should you decide that you might want to separate or you need to separate. Well, you've got debt. They're going to chase you for this debt. How are you going to pay the debt? So your post is being withheld. Now you've got another notice from the council, right? So you miss one payment. That's something that, even though it's not your fault, the perpetrator then can use against you and saying like, well, you know, you missed that letter. So clearly you can't be trusted to pay the council tax. I'll just take care of all of it.
Mm-hmm.
That's very, very common. Like, well, you missed it. You know, you're obviously too busy. You must have other priorities. Money isn't your strong suit. These are the things that are very, very commonly told. One of the things we're hearing about a little bit more now as well is for women who've entered into relationships very young, who might have not, you know, owned a property, might not know anything about council tax because they've gone straight from living with their parents to maybe living with the abusive partner. And when you have someone who says, well, I know what I'm doing and you clearly don't, or also can disguise it as, you know, I'm being really helpful here. You know, you don't have to worry about this. I'll take care of everything. But what women have said afterwards is when they have started to realize what's happening with the money, or they've left and it's all come out that there is coerced debt, that, you know, there have been forms of financial abuse, they do describe it as just a complete form of entrapment. But it was entrapment that was disguised as love and taking care of someone. But the gaslighting, 100%. I don't know if you have anything you'd like to add, Judy, around that.
No, I think you're absolutely spot on there, Jen. You know, and it's exactly that. It's not, the behaviours don't start as overtly abusive. They start as loving, kind, caring gestures that a lot of people will be like, oh, that's great. I don't have to have the pressure of thinking about that. But when something else starts to happen and they start to reflect on things and maybe think about, because when you said earlier on, Gayle, about changes in behaviour, that is absolutely so critical to understanding and looking and spotting the signs, because it is changes in behaviour that you'll start to see. As Jen outlined, somebody will maybe be less outgoing. You know, all of those changes in behaviour are so important. But as I say, they're very often entered into totally willingly by the survivor. So when you were linking it back to that, you know, they get blamed for it. Well, absolutely. Well, nobody asked you to, you know, I didn't force you to get that loan with us. You agreed it would be a good thing. We said we'd go on this holiday to Florida. We got that loan. You know, so all of these things that have been done, usually by the survivor, to try and not, you know, to have a healthy relationship, or because they're afraid of the consequences. Well, if I say no, what will happen? oh, I'll get the silent treatment for a week. They won't talk to me. That this will happen, that will happen, and I quite do fancy that holiday. So okay, I will just put it in my name. They have got poor credit. All of those things. So yeah, I think that's one of the things that makes it so difficult for people to understand because they think this wouldn't happen to me. I would have spotted the signs. I wouldn't have gone down that path. And we hear that time and time and time again from people before I realised it was in so deep, and then I was trapped. And that's exactly what it's about: is make you dependent on them, trap you in the relationship so that you can't leave. Never mind, won't leave. So yeah, it's a much bigger problem than most people actually start to think about when they think they know something about domestic abuse.
I can't help but think, given what you've both said there, that it's really important for credit unions, financial institutions to be seen as a safe place that
Mhm.
that victims of abuse can phone and speak to confidentially. And I think really important we have policies in place to support where we can. I wondered if we could talk about escalation and violence. I appreciate we've not spoken about that so far, but I was reading some research last week that said potentially the heightened time of escalation can actually be when the survivor chooses to leave. That can be the time where it's most dangerous. And I just wondered if anyone's listening into this and thinking about leaving, what advice you might have or guidance you might have for that person.
So the first would be to contact a specialist service. Don't do anything. One of the things in Women's Aid that we would quite frequently be saying to survivors who come to our service, they'd come and they'd find out, oh, I have got legal rights and I have got options, and they'd almost be emboldened by that. And we would say, well, do not go back to your partner and tell them that you're going to leave, because you're absolutely correct there, Gayle. Separation, that physical separation, is actually the time when risk escalates. And I think over the last 10 years, we see more women killed after leaving than during the relationship. I think the majority of women are killed within the first month of leaving, but it can be months later, because there can be things like, a court case for the perpetrator, or the survivor goes into a new relationship, and then the risk escalates, because domestic abuse is fundamentally all about power and control. It's where one person wants to gain and maintain and sustain complete control over the other person. And what we do know from victim survivors is that they'll say, I stayed because I had no options to leave. I stayed because I wanted the children to finish school. I stayed because I didn't think the children were seeing it. And then the risk just starts to escalate, and they say, I actually left because I wanted the children to finish school. I didn't want to be killed. I didn't want this to happen. So risk and escalation is one of the biggest, one of the most important things to learn about risk and escalation markers, risk indicators, etc. So if somebody is listening to this and thinking, gosh, I didn't realize that all the things that they've been talking about are actually things that are happening to me. Because, we have a lot of people who say, well, my partner doesn't hit me, but he does control who I see, where I go, how I talk, how I dress, how I eat, how I sleep. So I would say reach out to a specialist service, plan to leave. We will support people who want to stay in the relationship, we'll support people who want to leave the relationship, and we'll support people who already have left the relationship. And we have decades of experience around safety planning to leave safely, putting measures and mechanisms in place, whether that is moving into refuge, or whether that's photocopying your documents, leaving a bag in your workplace with emergency items should you have to leave suddenly. So that kind of crisis time of leaving, but also planned leaves. There's so much information and support out there. And survivors do have legal rights. There's not as many sources of support as there should be, but there are far more than most people realise. So what we would always encourage people to do is speak to the helpline, speak to somebody, and find out where your options and choices are. Because survivors are used to, and they've been told day in, day out, there is no option for you. You can't leave. If you leave, things will get much worse. And actually, there is a lot of things that are out there that actually, once they learn about, they can start to contemplate what would leaving look like. Would it be safe? Would it be better? And that's generally what survivors are doing day in, day out, trying to manage safety and make things better for themselves, better for their children. So yeah, it would be reach out. You will never be, nobody will say this is what we want you to do, this is what we think you should do. We won't force your hand unless we thought, that you were at significant risk of harm. And in that case, we would say, we are very worried about this person's risk to your safety. This is what we think we have to do. But generally, it would be, here's your options and choices. What would you like to do? Do you want time to think about this? How can we engage with you confidentially in a safe way so you can come back to us? So we would look at, there's loads of different ways that and again, thinking about, as employers, we see women, and obviously some of the other services will see other people as well in their workplace, because their workplace is a place of safety. And it can be somewhere where they can access a specialist service. They can maybe use the internet in there to find out what their legal rights are, because they can't use it at home because they're surveyed, they're monitored, etc. So my advice would be, you're not alone, you're not to blame. There are lots of survivors who've been in this situation. There are options and choices. People do get safer every day, and just reach out. You will not regret making that call and making that contact.
And I love that idea, Judy, of planning.
Yeah, really important to
Really
plan.
important.
But it's also really important as well to recognise that sometimes safety just escalates. And I said earlier about, there's over 60,000 incidents of domestic abuse that are reported to the police. Only 1 in 5 people report to the police. And the ones that get reported to the police are the tip of the iceberg, when the person thinks, I'm going to get killed tonight, or my children are going to get harmed tonight, or my pets are going to get harmed, or the perpetrator has been so violent and abusive, the neighbours hear it. So it's about recognising that, as I say, the thing that very often brings it to our attention is sometimes a really significant event, but it's been going on day in, day out, day in, day out. So yeah, support and access and thinking about crisis or preparing to leave. And we know on average, a woman will leave 7 times before managing to leave safely, because the perpetrator makes it so difficult for them. Because if you're looking to leave, you've got housing, you've got childcare, you've got employment, you've got food to put on the table, you've got bills to pay, probably still new bills, because probably you're leaving the family home, the mortgage is probably in your name, and you're going to have to now incur extra financial hardships to leave safely. So we do have things like we piloted the Fund to Leave. So Scottish Women's Aid in 2023 got some money from the Scottish Government, and about 5 women's aid groups were able to have this fund to support women and children to access the essentials when they're forced to leave. And we were really pleased to hear just a couple of months ago that has been extended now by the Scottish Government. They put £1 million into that. We're just waiting on some of the finer detail about how that's actually going to be rolled out, because absolutely, as Jen said there, physical separation is not the same as economic safety. And we need to really recognise that and manage that much better than we have been in the past. So it's great that there are some things coming into play, and a lot of that is as a result of things like our survivor reference group who've advocated for the changes that are needed there. So yeah.
Yeah, and I guess I would just quickly add, sorry.
Yeah, go for it, Jen.
You like the plan to leave, and it is incredibly difficult to plan. And again, it's directly related to safety. So every person, whoever's listening right now, it is part of your individual journey, and you go at your own speed, but absolutely trying to reach a specialist service, if it is safe for you to do so, is incredibly important to get that advice. It's incredible how empowering it can be to hear, I do qualify for benefits. I will get housing benefit if I do physically separate, or I am able, there is a legal intervention that will remove the perpetrator from the house. That might be an option for one. It might not be the option for the other. But I think about the planning to leave, I think this is where financial institutions can be incredibly helpful. And again, as I mentioned at the beginning, having awareness around what economic abuse is and the type of support that's required. but practical support things like maybe opening a new sole account in secret, if it's safe for that person to do so, and listening and asking those questions are paramount to say, we would like to do this. We understand the situation that you're in right now. All you have is this joint account, which obviously your partner's monitoring. Can we do something for you? Making sure that the update of the new account doesn't go to the address, right? So that the perpetrator doesn't see it. The safe communication, changing PINs, changing passwords, helping that person reestablish their financial setup and well-being. That is so important. And we've seen more and more financial institutions now also offering emergency funds to leave, or flee funds, as they're sometimes called, where a customer does call in and say, I need to leave tonight. I don't have access to a single pound. I need a bus fare for me and my children, and I need to get into a hotel so that I can access the women's aid that's not on our island, for example. So, and they will provide small amounts of money, I think even up to £500, some of them, the same with the fund to leave, for that emergency situation. And it's not a loan, you don't have to repay it. But sometimes it is just as little as that to get to that next step of safety. Like Judy says, the average amount of times a woman returns to her abusive partner before physically separating is 7. And that comes down to a lack of resources, a lack of finances. If that person controls your whole world, including your resources, we couldn't do it. I couldn't walk out the door right now. No wallet, no phone, no house keys, no car key, no nothing, and no access to my accounts. I would be back because I have to be back, because I'm not going to get very far. So again, back to that, the UN theme of all together. That's great that ScotRail, it's great that some pharmacies and some banks have introduced safe words where you can come in and just say it, and then you get the train fare for free and everything. But that's great for an emergency situation. But what we now need to do is all pull together, it doesn't end there. The abuse does not end when the relationship ends. What can we do? What's our role as, your financial service provider to assist you to now get back on your feet financially and make sure that the abuse doesn't continue through your finances? And that's a really, really important role for you guys to play.
And at a credit union, we offer the facility to save while you earn. So money can be deducted from your pay and go into an individual account if it's safe to do so, of course. Just touching on your crisis points and leaving where there is a thought of violence or life is in danger, that's a 999 call. Would that be right?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
A 999 call, absolutely. And there's also things like the silent option. So say you were hiding in the cupboard and you've managed to grab your phone and you don't want,
Yep.
you press 55 when the operator answers, and then they know that that you can't speak. If that's obviously from a landline, it's a lot easier in terms of tracing it. But there's specialist training for call handlers in those situations as well, so that you can try and get at safe, improve the safety of the person in that kind of real crisis situation. But yeah, the police, we rolled out a new law in Scotland in 29, the Domestic Abuse Scotland Act, and 14,000 police officers were trained, and there's an ongoing training programme. So again, as I said at the beginning, we have improved things over the last 40 years. So there should be a more supportive and effective response. But yeah, absolutely, call 999 if you think your life or anyone in your household's life is in danger.
You don't have to wait to call the police, obviously in that crisis situation as well. But as Judy said, we do have legislation that covers all forms of coercive and controlling behavior. So police should be responding to all of them. And you should be able to walk into, if again, it's safe for you to do so, you feel confident, you can bring someone with you to report other forms of abuse to the police as well. They're withholding my food. I'm not allowed to access the refrigerator. They've stopped me from going to work. I've had to drop out of uni. Those are all forms that amount to coercive and controlling behavior if there's a pattern, and police have been trained to spot the pattern. So crisis, absolutely, 999, that's what you want to do. But don't feel that you need to get to that particular point before you can access support and before support will be made available. It's definitely not the case. And that's why our legislation was so groundbreaking as well, because we've criminalized coercive and controlling behavior. And that's, part of our mission, like we say, to expand people's understanding that it's not just physical violence. The crisis point will yes, entail usually physical violence and threat to life, but there's no need to wait until that point.
So important. Just before our team joins us to ask some questions from across our network, I just wanted to ask, if someone's listening to this that recognises themselves as a perpetrator, what would your guidance or advice be to them? Can they get help?
Yes, absolutely. So as I said at the beginning, we manage and deliver the Scottish Domestic Abuse and Forced Marriage Helpline, and we partner with the Men's Advice Line to deliver that service to male victims. And the Men's Advice Line is part of an organisation called Respect. And Respect are a UK-wide, well-recognised, really effective organisation that provides support to people who are worried about their own behaviour, or it's also people who are worried about the behaviour of someone they know. So yeah, if somebody's listening and they're thinking, well, I'm actually quite controlling, and there's things that I can really echo with, things that I can recognise in my own behaviour, we would encourage them to look up their website, call the helpline, and really try and get support to understand, so they can take accountability for their behaviour and think about the changes that they need to make to benefit themselves. But primarily we're looking to keep victims and survivors safe. And there are other things in Scotland. There are some kind of court mandated programmes for people who are convicted of domestic abuse offences, that are these behaviour change programmes. But yeah, we would really encourage somebody to look at the Respect website. And again, there's advice there for professionals as well as individuals. So again, if you're working in an organisation and you hear your colleagues speaking in a way to their partner on the phone and you think, that doesn't sit well with me, you can phone or you can access the website. You can, there's lots of ways you can get information to find out what should I be doing here. So again, it's about, everyone together. We need to have a 360 holistic response here. We want to get people safer sooner. We don't want, as Jenn was saying, we don't want to have people have to wait until they're being seriously assaulted. We want people to recognise this behaviour is, abusive. And I have the legal tools are there to offer access, support and protection, and to use them. But we also want to do what we've failed to do really for so long, is actually make the perpetrators visible. It's their behaviour that is the cause for concern. It's them that are the foundational risk to adult and child survivors. So conversations that can actually focus on them as well. And as you say, highlight pathways to support is really, really important. So yeah, Respect would be my top tip.
Yeah, and I'd bring it back around again to the professionals, like, so, because I'm like, I know we're talking to financial institutions. So, what are you going to do? What challenge can you set yourself, not just in 16 days, but beyond, to say, we have seen the account activity. We're behind the scenes, we can see this, and we can see, since customer A has entered into the relationship with customer B, that customer A's finances are all over the place. This is really irregular behavior, and we've had this customer for 5-10 years. What steps would you be willing to take, or can you take, from a policy perspective or a procedural perspective, terms and condition, to hold the perpetrator to account? Because most likely what will happen is, once they are done with that relationship, they will move on and there will be another customer. And they tend to, at the moment, because there's not enough recognition or a systemic practice in place to hold them accountable, they'll walk away scot-free, which is really, really difficult in terms of understanding economic justice for survivors, because the survivors will be sitting there with the debt, oftentimes life-changing amount of debt that will not allow them to rebuild their lives and move on. And when they are speaking to financial institutions or local authorities even, and going, well, what are you going to do about person B? I'm telling you, this wasn't me, this is not my debt. And you go, well, you're in touch, so we're probably going to pursue you for the debt, and it's their credit file that gets damaged. And we know how difficult it can be to, look for further lending, look for housing, look for all these things that you need to be safe and to thrive. If your credit file is damaged, we live in a society where that's king, right? The credit file. So that's something we're looking for as well. Is it's great to have the awareness around what it is, but what are steps that can realistically be taken to make this, one, less easy for perpetrators, but two, will actually hold them accountable once they've done it, because that's where we're seeing real gaps in practice right now. It's just like, well, you're still speaking to us, customer A, and you're clearly the one who wants to rebuild. We can't find the other person, so sorry about that. That's where real systems change is going to happen.
I think after listening to you both over the last hour, it's really important we all act and stand up together against this, hugely so. We're going to be joined now by some of our team to ask you some work and life questions about what you do. So welcome to Stacey and Diana from our headquarters.
Hello.
Hi
How are
there.
you?
Yeah,
Good, thank
It's been
you. Nice to
useful.
meet you.
So we have 5 questions from the team. If whoever wants to go first wants to pick between 1 and 5.
We
They're
hear
good
the question
questions.
first. Because obviously Judy's expertise and mine are very different. I don't know, do you want to read them out and we can go from there, or would you rather
Would you
one of
want,
us?
Jen, do you want to pick a number and then we can just, because they're mixed.
I'm gonna
Okay.
go for 3. I'll go for 3.
3. Okay. If Scottish Women Aid had a superpower, what would it be?
Well,
That's a
obviously
great
to
question.
eliminate, wave a wand and eliminate the patriarchy.
Love it.
And yeah, it would definitely be to end domestic abuse and all forms of violence against women. That's the only reason we exist to begin with. So that superpower would be incredible. And it's not just something, you know, when we talk about the patriarchy and it, you know, women's inequality being cause and consequence of domestic abuse and violence against women, the patriarchy also hurts men. The expectations that come from men as well. So we would be a much better society. And it probably wouldn't just be for Scotland, would it, Judy? I think if we had a superpower, we would just wave a wand and yeah, violence against women would be eliminated across the world, I think.
Great
Good
answer.
answer.
Perfect. Judy, would you like to pick a number?
I'll pick number 4.
Number 4. I think you've touched on this a little bit, but what more could workplaces do to support the Scottish Women's Aid?
So yeah, it's just recognizing that the workplaces are an incredibly, you know, useful location to normalize talking about domestic abuse. So there's multiple things that they can do. You know, training, education for is really important. Accessing our training, we do a lot of training for workplaces, a lot of the time, and it's really interesting kind of picking up from some of the things we've already discussed. I'll get lots of organisations getting in touch with me and saying, we want to talk about how we support survivors. And I'm like, that's fantastic. We can talk about that. We can look at your policy. We can, you know, tell you a little bit about the signs you might see in the workplace. We can help you make a case for maybe why you need to invest in training. So we can talk about the economic impact as well as the emotional impact. But what I'll also always say is, you will be employing perpetrators as well. So can we think about the kind of messaging that we need to do around that and the support and the kind of key messages and pathways that we want around that. So yeah, get involved with get to know your local women's aid group, get involved with campaigns like the 16 Days of Activism. In each local authority area, the council will have violence against women and girls partnerships that will offer quite often free training and awareness raising. There'll be sometimes people will say we want to identify a champion in the organisation. So there's one person who becomes the kind of conduit for keeping up to date with legislative changes and you know, being that person who will maybe look at policies and things like that to make sure that can we have a flexible leave policy? Can we have special leave? How do we think about those adaptations and changes we might need to make in the workforce? So yeah, there's lots that individuals can do in the workplace, and there's lots that can kind of take that kind of strategic approach as well.
Partnership, right? It's all about partners. Doing this today is a great example of how you've supported us. I don't think we would have ever reached this audience if it hadn't been for Gayle to reaching out to us, and that's a very powerful way for us to get our message out there. and let people know and combine it with, what you do. So partnership working and referral pathways make a huge difference.
Thank you. So, I've got 1, 2, and 5 left, Jen.
5.
Number 5. If you could recommend one book or movie, what would it be?
Oh, wow.
That's a tough one.
I don't know. This is terrible. Now that you've asked every single movie and every single book I've ever read, it's my mind. So this is a cop out. But we watched This Is Christmas last night, and it is excellent. And it's all about people who commute on a train and how we should all speak to one another. And I think, so for the lack of anything else, it's just
Nice.
I'm like, don't say Jurassic Park.
That's a nice choice.
Yeah, sorry, it's just literally what we watch, and that's what's coming up. But the messaging is beautiful because inevitably we probably do all commute in some way or another. And just remembering that, as we've talked about, there's so much going on in people's lives that a simple hello or the life-changing difference that can make, you just never know. So I'm sure there's great literature I should be mentioning here, but we're going with This Is Christmas.
Great, thank you.
Okay, so we've got 1 and 2 left, Judy.
I'll take 1.
1.
Thank you.
Okay, so again, you've probably touched on most things, but what's one thing you wish everyone in Scotland knew about your organisation?
Oh, probably our website. Yes. Yeah, I think it kind of goes back to what Jen was saying there about the patriarchy. People tend to think we're an organization that has got a particular focus, and but we know that the system that we live in benefits no one. It is founded on patriarchy. It is really harmful to have these kind of gender stereotypes that limit people or set expectations, and that's as harmful to men as well. That's certainly very harmful to men as well as to women. So I think, that as I say, we were working to end domestic abuse in Scotland for everyone. Just to come to us, come to our helpline, come to our website, to let us partner with them on that journey that they're wanting to take. Because I love Jen's recommendation of the movie because it's all about relationships. Absolutely, it's all about relationships. So
final one, Jen. If there was a perfect gift for you under the Christmas tree, what would it be? I mean, both of you.
I think both should answer this one.
What's the perfect gift?
Again, very, very specific. We're moving in a few days, and there's no Christmas decorations and no Christmas tree. So, I think like an interior decorator. We'd just be sitting there on Christmas Day going, we're ready. Very specific to right now, but that's kind of what's at the forefront of my mind is, someone who would, again, just maybe wave a magic wand and the house would be fully set up and ready to go.
For me, I think it would be something like an endless buffet table full of the most delightful fine dining, but also some real junk food as well. So that you just get a good smorgasbord because I love to eat. So something that just replenished itself all the time, so that I didn't have to. I do actually enjoy cooking, but I mean, if that's because they're quite hard questions. If I'm meant to answer something really kind of profound, I'm like, no, just give me an endless buffet table full of good
That
food,
sounds
a
good.
glass of wine.
That sounds good.
Sounds so good. Plus somebody to do all the dishes as well.
Oh yeah. Paper plates,
Girls,
Like
stay with us. Girls, stay with us. Can I just ask one last question to you both? What's your passion for this? Why do you love doing what you do, and what's the passion for you?
For me, I think it's just I've always been a big advocate for equality and unfairness. Just really, it's always been it's all my background's always been kind of social justice and stuff like that. So I think it's just wanting to make a difference and being able to hopefully go to your bed every night and put your head in the pillow and say, well, at least today I did no harm. You know, hopefully what I've done is actually help somebody, because as we were talking about just before we started, if anything that I can do or our organisation can do can help one person either start to think about things or even, affect some real change for them, yeah, that I'm good with that. Yeah.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
I mean, I think that's all of us probably at Scottish Women's Aid, isn't it? For me, it's very personal. My mom experienced economic abuse, and it's a form of abuse that we still are learning about, and it's always been there, but I think now we have more language to discuss it. It's coming up in research and all these things. So, it's deeply personal. So my personal mission is, we didn't know that's what was happening, as Judy said. We just went, well, no one's getting hit, so this isn't that bad. So my personal mission is to raise awareness of this to anyone I can, so that no one ever has to experience it again. And it's all for my mom. So yeah.
And we can survive.
Absolutely. Yeah, she's just bought her first house.
And thrive.
So there you go.
Survive and thrive.
Absolutely.
For anyone listening, you're not alone. For anyone listening, there's helplines, there's opportunities to plan, but also if you're in danger, to escalate that quickly, either through the silent text message. Is that right? 55?
You press 55 on your phone when it's a
55.
call, when you've opened that phone line. Yeah.
Or to call 999 if you're in danger. And that applies across the country. We appreciate we've been speaking to Scottish Women's Aid today, but we operate in England and Wales and Northern Ireland, and those helplines would be applicable there.
Yeah, we do part. So if somebody called the Scottish helpline number, but they were somewhere in England and Wales or Northern Ireland, we would connect them to that. And through our helpline, we also have a national picture around refuge spaces throughout the country, because sometimes people will, because of the risk from the perpetrator, feel that they have to move from one end of the country to another. I'd also say there's also things like the Domestic Abuse Disclosure Scheme Scotland, which some people would probably know as Clare's Law. In England and Wales, I think it's called Clare's Law. So if you are listening to this and you're thinking, I'm a bit worried about the person I've just gone into a relationship with, or I'm a bit worried about the person my family member's just gone into a relationship, you can either anonymously or online or walk into a police station, go in and say, I'm Judy Ferguson and I'm in a relationship with Robert Brown, or I'm Judy Ferguson and my sister's in a relationship with Robert Brown, and I'm concerned about some of the behaviours I'm seeing there. This Disclosure Scheme Scotland allows for the police then, through a very rigorous protocol and procedure, to assess the information that's known about, say, it's Robert Brown, and if they consider that they do pose a significant risk to their new partner, they will, in a planned way, go out and visit that person and give them that information. And there has been some research that shows that in the very early stages, when that's somebody who's maybe already thinking, I'm not quite sure about them, and they shouted at me, or I felt a bit, that it can help them make a decision to leave the relationship. So there's that's something that I would encourage people to become aware of as well, because it's I think it's just had its 10-year anniversary. So lots of support out there.
Thank you. It's been a real privilege to speak to you both today. Thank you so much for all that you do with Scottish Women's Aid. Thank you, Jen. Thank you, Judy. And we'll certainly share all the guidance and helplines that you've shared with us today. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It's been lovely talking to you. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Money Made Human podcast. We're grateful to spend time with you and hope you enjoyed it. If you want to join a credit union, choose us. With love, until the next time, First Class Credit Union.